actually, maybe we should ask Chioma as the lady on the panel. Please to go first. That would be the right thing to do.
Why, thank you, David. Hello, everyone. So my name is Chioma Onuchukwu, and I am the head of TuneCore for West and East Africa.
Cool. Andrew.
Hello, everyone. My name is Umeadi Onyekwelu. I'm head of Mdundo for West Africa.
Robert.
Hi, everybody. I'm the Senior Vice President of LyricFind, and I'm coming to you here from the place where we live, work, and play in Treaty 7 in Canada, actually, Calgary, on Orange Shirt Day, which is the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, to commemorate the people who were lost to the residential school system here in Canada, and to bring forth new ways.
Cool, thanks. I'm David Alexander. I'm also SVP, but at Downtown Music Holdings. We have a range of services for creators, from the direct to creator, like CD Baby and Song Trust, all the way through the business services at Downtown Music Services and platform services like Fuga for really big businesses. So really good to be here with all of you. And just to let you know, it seems that our host is having some technical challenges.
I think I'm here, David. Are you hearing me?
Okay, yeah, yes. We got you, Mike.
Awesome, good. Thank you, David and team, for the self-introductions. The show must go on, as they say in our business. So this is discussing embracing the new normal, and this is one of the things that happens in the new normal. But this is today in the context of licensing in the new normal with regards to the evolving roles of platforms, distributors, labels, and publishers. I think just for our audience, just to make sure that everyone knows what each role is in the industry, I'll just go to each of you and maybe describe where you fit in terms of the organizations you represent, in terms of a distributor, a label, and a publisher, and any other as a platform. Let's start with you, Andrew, from Mdundo.
Hello, everyone. My name is Onyekwelu Andrew. I'm in charge of music licensing for West Africa for Mdundo. Mdundo is a DSP, which stands for Digital Service Provider. So we're a platform where our users can go and download music, stream music, and also share music. So yeah.
Excellent. So Mdundo is at the customer-facing end of the value chain, right? So that's where a customer accesses music.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh yes.
Okay. Excellent. So I'm actually going to work backwards now. I'm going to go to a distributor. If we can discuss this from a value chain point of view. Let's talk to Chioma from TuneCore. So how do you interact with platforms like Mdundo and others? Feel free to mention others as well.
Okay, so again, my name is Chioma Onuchukwu, head of TuneCore West and East Africa. So at TuneCore, we offer music distribution services to platforms like Mdundo. So basically what it means is that we help deliver your music to streaming platforms all over the world. So we currently deliver to 150 plus streaming platforms worldwide. And secondly, we also offer publishing and administration. So basically, we can help you register with the various PROs around the world, and of course, the collective management organizations around the world, and help send you your royalties from performance rights, sync licensing, cover, as well as YouTube sound recording as well. So that's basically what we can help artists do and what we've been doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Chioma. So PROs, for those who don't know, in Eastern Africa, we also call them CMOs, collective management organizations, or they're also known as performance rights organizations as well. So David, where do you come into this value chain?
Thanks, Mike. I started out in a single lane. I had a business called Share Music Publishing. So we represent songs and songwriters, mainly African songs and songwriters for the world. A couple of years ago, I sold the company to Downtown Music Holdings, and I now work for the holding company. Downtown bought an aggregator distributor called CD Baby, and actually CD Baby was probably one of the first distributors in the market. It delivered physical goods to stores, so you would send CD Baby a whole bunch of CDs, cassettes, or vinyl, and they would send it out, to everybody. They have evolved and are still a direct-to-creator platform, so you can load up your own music and send it to Apple Music or to Spotify. Being one of the older ones, it started off without many competitors and had a $29.99 price point, which, for the market, the US and for Western Europe, was not bad for having your music up for life. But I kept pointing out to them that doesn't really translate into the new markets, particularly the African market, which was a big concern for me. So CD Baby just announced a $5 all-you-can-eat fee. Your music is up for life. It's a one-time payment, so it's really easy to do that. Like some of the other services, you can collect your publishing if you are the owner of the master and the publishing, but there are other publishing services within the company Downtown. So here in Africa, Sheer still runs as a brand, and across the world under Downtown Music Services. And for the bigger artists or labels, there are companies that service them too. So depending on your level in the market, your ability to engage with an audience, your ability to demonstrate value to a company, there is an offering that is for you. And the big thing about Downtown Music Services is that they're not a competitor. So they don't own any content. They got out of the content business, and therefore they are like Switzerland in terms of servicing all of the creators, whether they're B2C or B2B in the market. Thanks, Mark. We can't hear you.
Mike is gone again, so maybe I'll jump in then. In the meantime, he's trying to find a different situation. So LyricFind is a B2B company, actually. It was the first company in the lyric distribution business. We have worked with all the companies. We're not currently working with Mdundo, but with Mdundo we worked with aggregating lyrics from your services as well. Not actually getting lyrics to you, but getting lyrics from you. And we'd like to start that again, Andrew. So talk to my friend Martin over there later. Thanks. And what LyricFind does is distributes lyrics. So we work with the music publishers, and we work with Downtown on all the music that you sub-publish also still. So you're not totally out of the content business, David, because you do sub-publish a whole lot of works. And we license those to over 120 platforms, including Google Search, Amazon Music, Pandora, Deezer, Mercedes-Benz is showing lyrics and lyric translations in each car now that they're coming out with. We work with platforms like hospitals to show lyrics along with the music for healing purposes so people can read the words. So I'm in charge of working with all the publishers, but we also have a new product that allows us to work with labels. We also work with TuneCore and Believe as well. Actually, Believe was in my office in New York until they bought TuneCore a few years ago. So what we do is we bring in the digital world lyrics to the fans through the different platforms that we work with, which increases the value of label catalogs and works catalogs as well, because the more fans know the lyrics to your song, the more customers you have, or the more hearts you've touched. My own personal mission over the last almost 19 years has been to give music subtitles, legal lyric translations. Deezer has just launched the top 10,000 Anglophone songs are on Deezer. The lyrics are on Deezer in 4 different European languages. Well, international languages, let's say. So Spanish, French, Portuguese, and German. And as well, at some point, I'd love for the African languages to be translated back into English, at least for the biggest number of people around the world who can understand the African lyrics. Besides SVP of LyricFind, I'm also a partner in the new top-level domain initiative called .music. So Kenya.music, TuneCore.music, Africa.music, guitar.music, hip-hop.music, etc. Every artist.music, every song.artist.music. And I do a few other, I'm partners in a few other companies as well. Sync Summit, the only conference about music synchronization. Mondo in New York, which is happening in October. It's the music conference in New York. Air to CMJ, which I saw David at a few years ago, and invited him to. So yeah, so I do a few different things, but with LyricFind, we're the one of two companies that can distribute your lyrics internationally on many different platforms, so that fans know what the lyrics to your songs are. And lyrics are the #1 search term on the internet, and the lyric translation has now been proven by YouTube, who does closed captioning because of my work, and that's brought Google literally billions of dollars, because people are searching for what the African songs mean, but unfortunately Google Translate doesn't work so well with African lyrics, but Spanish it works pretty well with, because those are the two biggest languages, especially in America. And Spanish sung music is now $1 billion business in the US. When YouTube launched, the closed captioning was about 200 million. So it's gone up ×5, and that's really, really proven the concept. So all of the other DSPs in the next couple of years or so will be adding subtitles, music subtitles, which will mean that songs in your languages will be available to understand in many other languages around the world. And then music will be truly universal. The only universal music right now is instrumental music, because if music has lyrics, words are not universal. And I don't want everybody in the world to be singing English just because it's the export music language. It's important to write and sing in your own languages. I don't know if Mike's going to be back on or not, so I've just been...
Yep, Mike is back on the mic, don't worry.
Mike's back on, okay. Good.
I want to jump in and say, you talked about really big numbers there, but I think what's important to the audience out there is currently, if you're properly monetizing your lyrics, it's 8% of your publishing revenue. So, that's probably going to go up through the work that you're talking about with YouTube. But if you're not doing it, you're missing out on money. So I think that's really
we actually, David, we actually double the per stream numbers per click when the lyrics are exhibited. On paid services, ×2, 100%. And on ad-supported services like YouTube, it would be ×4 the click rate. So it's a very significant lift in the per. So yeah, and we also work with self-published artists, and we're doing these scalable lyric videos now, free to create, and lyric translation videos as well. So that's also an opportunity for labels, which really changes our business model. Thanks, David, for mentioning
that. That's
that.
awesome, Robert.
Yeah, go on.
Go ahead, Chioma. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I wanted to say I agree 100% with Robert on that one. Like now with TuneCore, we're seeing more and more artists requesting for, distribution of lyrics to platforms. And of course, with what I mentioned before about YouTube sound recordings and even revenue from videos, we're seeing it skyrocket right now since ending of 2021 going into 22. So definitely, I think a lot of artists are starting to see, that there's a lot of money to be made there if, of course, they're doing the writing. I mean, lyrics are part of the composition, so you should be monetizing and getting everything back, even if someone replicates your work and the composition still belongs to you. So that's something I think artists are gradually starting to understand. And then we're seeing the numbers, of course, increase. Yeah, more deliveries for lyrics to streaming platforms.
Actually, one thing that's interesting.
I'm glad we're doing a little bit about, sorry, Robert, I'm glad we're doing a little bit about focusing on the subtopic of lyrics. I just want to go to Mdundo in terms of how do they offer, is that an offering from Mdundo at the moment? I know Mdundo's model is ad-based, putting an ad in front of the recording, but do you make lyrics available in any other way apart from the recording opportunity?
Currently right now, Mdundo is ad based, like he's just said. But currently, right now, we don't have that feature in place right now. But we're working towards that. The nearest feature we're looking at that maybe Q2 of 2023, hopefully. So I think by then would have. I think like Robert said, was it Robert or David that said he's in touch with our CEO, that's Martin?
Robert said that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we
Awesome.
have that in place. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. So there were some numbers mentioned as well around consumption. I want to also come to consumption because obviously what we all do here is based on the customer, right? So I want to come to the consumption of African music, but let's just go back a step and just close off on lyrics. I think Robert wanted to conclude with something around lyrics.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I just wanted to mention, some of you might not even know this, and frankly, I didn't recently, but on the lyric video side, which is a huge market right now on YouTube, and lyric video translations, the labels are actually claiming the rights for lyric videos, and YouTube and Vivo are only paying the labels, not the publishers. The publishers do get paid on mechanicals and performances, but they're not getting paid on reproduction rights, so lyric exhibition rights. And the labels understand that, at least in America, where copyright infringement is $150,000 per copyright infringement per screenshot of lyrics being shown or lyric videos being shown. All the majors are trying to work out a deal, and as well the independents, so that the reproduction rights also get paid. Because in America, which is a pretty major market, right now the big DSP, well, all the DSPs are protected under the Music Modernization Act and the Mechanical Licensing Act, MLC, sorry, Mechanical Licensing Collective. So they can't really be sued for copyright infringement on mechanicals and performances, but they can be sued on lyric exhibitions, on reproduction rights. So it's an important discussion right now that's happening, that some of the money from YouTube and Vivo that's been going to the labels can also go to the publishers, because it protects the labels from litigation in America. So that's going to be a change. You're talking about, the new normal, and I think the new normal is actually copyright administrators on both the work side and the sound recording side are trying to make sure that the DSPs actually pay for the proper rights on all of the different services that they offer. And I think during the pandemic, we saw the boom of streaming services. Things actually did really well. Sorry to use that word boom. That's a competitor of Mdundo, I think, Boomplay. But anyway, it's, the pandemic streaming services went way up. But I think it's really important always for the administrators or the owners of copyrights to protect the copyrights from the DSPs who aren't actually paying correctly in a lot of different cases. So I think that's kind of a new normal aspect, which has really always been there, but the technology is moving so fast that to protect copyrights on new technologies and older technologies, and remember the internet is not that old, is still essential, and it's kind of the main role of labels and publishers. Besides marketing and promoting, it's also protecting the rights that they administer. Thanks.
Thanks, Robert. And I think
thank you, Robert. That's a very important. Go ahead,
Mike.
Go ahead,
just
David.
to add, the recent ruling by the Copyright Review Board in the US has raised the rate for publishers and writers. And that's really important, because that's another 50% uplift in terms of the revenue. Labels were getting really the lion's share, and probably their investment in the capital was important. But songwriters, particularly because there are now so many songwriters working on each track, were unable to make a living in this new streaming age. The rate per stream, Robert talked about the rate uplift with the lyrics, but despite that, still the rate per stream was very low. Now we see that rate going up again, and I think the balance is getting better in terms of what the songwriters and the artists are getting. It's more fair in terms of the duration of the copyright. Composers get much longer to claim revenue for their songs. They get life plus 50 or 70 years, depending on what territory you're in. whereas masters generally have 35 to 50 years, and the copyright expires. So that balance is getting better. So it does mean that if you're a songwriter, you need to be careful about how you're taking care of your compositions. Are you doing it through an aggregator, which is fine, but do you understand what they can and can't collect on your behalf? Because there's definitely the PRO portion that has to come back to your PRO, the one that you registered at. And sometimes if you're in Kenya and that's MCSK, or if you're in Nigeria and that's MCSN, you might not actually see any of that money coming back. So it really is important to know what you're doing with your publishing. Talk to somebody who understands publishing, whether it's an IP lawyer or a publisher. All things are possible, but collecting 100% of your money is always difficult.
Awesome. Thank you, David. I want to go to consumption. I will also come back to copyright laws as well, because there have been some significant changes in the context of various trade deals being negotiated on the continent as well, especially with the US. But we'll come back to that because that is a new normal facing us moving forward. But I want to go to Mdundo. You've had some amazing growth this year since the IPO in 2020. You guys are ahead of your forecast of what was promised at the IPO. Very, very impressive, Andrew, to you, Martin, and the team, and such a great thing for the music industry to celebrate. I'm just wondering what's kind of driving that. What have you guys noticed in general consumption? Is it across the board? Is it Mdundo that's outstripping everyone else because you have a slightly different model to the other streaming services? Or are you, and I'll come to Chioma next to see what she's seeing as well. Are you just seeing a general?
Can you hear me? Okay, so for us, I think what is driving our model is or what is driving our group.
Maybe what those plans. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So for us at Mdundo, I think what is driving our growth. Okay. What is driving our growth in Africa? So in Africa, the demographics are different from what you have in Europe and North America, right? In Europe and North America, what the model there is basically subscription based or basically stream based. But here in Africa, most Africans or most of our users wants to download the song and have it on their phone full time. They don't want to hear, oh, they have to pay for subscription, or or they have to use their data to stream a song, because in Africa data is quite expensive, right? So here in for us, it's basically we're trying to give the users an alternative as to your normal pirated download copies that you have in Nigeria. You have not just OKE2 exclusive, where users here go to and download the song and it's on your phone for free. So that in turn drives up our users here in Nigeria, and you also find in East Africa we have more of our users, accessing our platform instead of going to a typical streaming or subscription based DSPs. So that in general has shot up our user numbers in Nigeria, Ghana, to more precise in West Africa, and also across Africa in general. So yeah, and we also see right now we have about 20 million users across Africa, while Nigeria is our highest user numbers. We have over 5 million users in Nigeria. We have a target of reaching 50 million users by 2025, and right now I think we're on track to achieve that.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. Chioma, what are you seeing in terms of consumption trends in Africa and also in the diaspora of African music?
So definitely, I agree what Andrew says about so Africans aren't ready to necessarily pay for music. So their model, which could also explain why they're also growing as fast as they are, is the model of download your music and ad-supported streaming platforms is encouraging more and more people to transition from visiting the piracy sites where music are uploaded illegally to now platforms like Mdundo. And of course, you see with the DSPs like Spotify, even Boomplay, YouTube with their ad support. Like we have YouTube Music in Nigeria. It's not present in certain territories, I think like Sierra Leone, Gambia, and maybe Uganda, where you have YouTube user app. They don't have that there. However, in a place like Nigeria and South Africa, you have YouTube Music that allows for ad-supported streaming, if you know what I mean. But also gives you the option to what's it called, to pay for a subscription and listen to music. So now I see that there's a slight transition in terms of the consumption of African music. Obviously, we love our Afrobeats. Piano is taking off, in South Africa, and it's kind of in close competition with Afrobeats right now. And then with the diaspora, again, you see people or artists like CK, Burna Boy, and the rest of them with, their music taking off over there. And you find, like for me, I have a lot of colleagues there who ask me questions about this. So we can see that there's this upward trend happening with the consumption of African music, not just it being stocked locally, in Africa, but now it's transitioning out. I would say thanks to, distribution, getting music on platforms, social media, which is a very big one now, with viral contents and challenges and what's it called? Like the Don't Rush challenge and stuff. So there is a shift happening with the consumption of African music. At least now it's readily available. And again, back to the point I made about social media, I think social media plays a very big part with people discovering African music and loving it and wanting to play it. And the recognition now you're seeing African artists get from like the Grammy Awards and so on and so forth is also bringing the attention to Africa. So there's a very wonderful transition happening. Like the eyes now are in African music, so it's quite exciting to see.
Thanks, Chioma. I want to go to you, David. You're in charge of developing markets, and one trend that we've seen that's working for crossing over of African music into the mainstream is collaborations driven by labels. There's been a number of big Nigerian US collaborations as well. As Downtown, is that something that that the label gets involved in, and is that a viable business model for any artist in Africa looking to break through?
Okay, so good point and good question. I just want to kind of reference of what Chioma was saying as an introduction. The consumption of African music, that small percentage that African music makes up as a part of the global music consumption, is really driven by very few clients. Those clients are the mainly West African Nigerian clients who've translated across into popular culture in the US and Europe. And it's definitely been through collaboration that they've done that and been successful. So it talks to that point. The other issue, of course, is how quickly we can get an uptake on the African continent, people signing up for services. Part of that is important, having somebody like Mdundo who is pricing correctly for the market. The other is convincing some of the other streaming services to recognize that there is a big difference in $10 in the US and $10 on the African continent. And I think pricing sensitivity is becoming better, but there's definitely a support as well for local streaming services because they are price sensitive, because they understand the local content, but local market, but they don't always have all the international tracks. I think that's one of the things that sometimes gets carved out. In terms of what Downtown does is we're not in the content business. We're in the services business. So we provide services to labels who own their own master, publishing companies who own their own publishing, and we distribute, we promote, we market. But for the publishing company, there is actually a network worldwide of a creative team. They've been in place since Downtown Music Publishing was in the traditional publishing business, and they are responsible for sync and collaboration. And definitely that is something we're working on. There might be some news about what's happening at Acces in Dar es Salaam in November. So keep your eye on the media because there will be opportunities for songwriters there. We're doing some master classes with songwriters in South Africa, particularly on scoring for film and TV, which is another way that you can get your music out there. We know that platforms like Netflix and Disney and now even Amazon Prime are coming here. The only way they're going to sell local subscriptions is they're going to have local content. So it's fine. They start with their Euro, Centro, or Western cultural content, and they get the top 5% in a market. But if you want to be deep in a market, if you would really want to access the power of an African market, you need to be able to deliver content that is relevant to the people. So they are all looking to localize and integrate productions there. And so in addition to these opportunities through collaboration, there's now an opportunity for your music to be on a show that's on an international platform, or to write for a show that is on an international platform, and that does get distributed worldwide too. So I think from a consumption basis, let's be clear that we're at the early end. There certainly is a lot of noise and hype around the big West African clients that are making it big out there. But I'd like that to be much deeper and more broad, and also for the collaboration to kind of be fair. What Beyonce did with the Lion King was maybe kind of utilize a lot of African creator content and not remunerate them in a very fair way. Fine, she's got a lot of power, and her team has a lot of power, but I'd like to see a rebalancing in those relationships. Thanks.
Awesome. I'm going to come to you in a minute, Chioma. I've seen you, but David, I just wanted, just on that example that you gave, and there are many examples, whose responsibility is that when we now actually look now down to, and how much, and this is something we've noticed with a lot of US stroke African deals around IP. It's generally one-sided, and let me reframe that question in the context that there are a lot of US trade deals currently being renegotiated for AGOA on the continent, and this gives an opportunity for governments to push back against some of these things as well. Ultimately, who is responsible for negotiating these best deals? And is there a chance to push back, or does everyone feel that they're too afraid that they may actually lose the deal?
So I can just talk from our experience, particularly in the Zangalewa with Shakira,
yes,
or in the Lion King shares, is that there was negotiation direct with the writers who were unrepresented. So where we then stepped in was after there was already an agreement in place.
Right.
And we advised the client to say this is particularly unfair. In the case of Zangalewa for Waka Waka, we had the opportunity to move the needle quite a bit. But in the case of the Lion King splits, those had been pre-agreed. The tracks were already in place. And then the writers were coming and saying, but hang on a second, why am I getting 2.5% when I was one of the major producers on the track?
Yeah.
But this is the thing is when is the time right to get proper advice? Whether you're going to a lawyer or you're going to a publisher, you need to do that early on. Paying your school fees, this is really important. They'll make sure to protect you and get the best value out of the deal. If my advice to songwriters, artists out there, is be sure to talk to somebody, some professional, before you sign a legal contract.
Awesome. Let's go to you, Robert. Chioma, please hold your question. I know you had something a couple of minutes ago. Robert?
Well, there are entities in the music world, as David knows very well, like Merlin, who does collective negotiation on behalf of independents. There's also Capasso, which obviously David helped form in South Africa, who are the CMO side of things, who we work with as well. So there are entities, and then of course in different parts of the world, like in the EU, where the EU would push back at Google and DSPs that are kind of infringing. Of course, there's legal action that can be taken in many parts of the world as well. So it stems from what David said, which is the basics in the first place, which is the artists and the songwriters getting good representation, but really all throughout the music ecosystem. And there's so much money that's not being claimed properly in the world right now. Willard, the founder of Cobalt, said it was 75% of the master side and 75% of the work side is not going to the proper copyright owners. This was a few years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit better than that now, I hope. But these are problems that we're working on solving every day in the music community, and things like the MMA and the MLC have moved the needle forward in those respects. But really, it's up to everybody from the first step, the basic step of getting good representation, legal representation and business representation when you're doing your deals in the first place, like David was emphasizing. And of course, Downtown also owns Song Trust. TuneCore works with Centric. These are big publishing companies that actually do register. And I know Downtown owns Song Trust. Sorry. So the new normal should be getting paid properly from all of the realms of the music ecosystem, and not having 75% of your money go to the incorrect place. It should be going to you. So especially with the loss of live music during the pandemic and the loss of selling plastic around the world, with the change to streaming, the margins have become much smaller. So for the songwriters and the artists to continue to exist, they have to really work on collective action, like Merlin in the record side, or Impel and IMPF in the publishing side, to actually make sure that the innovations that spring forward and create new opportunities also pay properly, and that music retains the value that it's always had in everybody's life. So it's super important to work together to solve the problems that exist, that most people have no idea exist. But I think everybody on this panel know that there's major problems that need to be solved. And some of what David and Andrew were speaking about, like knowing the local market. David mentioned localization. We live in a whole different era than when I started. There is globalization. These are global services, which is a big opportunity. But it's also makes a necessity to localize as well, and to know your local market, to work with local languages, which is localization. So the game has shifted. The new normal is that these are global services. That was not the case 20 years ago. There were no global services. So I worked with African music back in the day, and it was about getting Fela over to America. King Sunny Ade was in the top 100, albums. Those artists, it was about actually physically getting them to the major markets, usually through Europe. Europe was first, America was after Europe. But now it's different. Now it's actually getting, as Chioma said, social media start blow up. The artistic collaborations, you mentioned that as a question, Mike. I think that's really good. That's the reason that Spanish sung music is $1 billion market in the US. And artistic collaborations only happen when people can understand each other's language. So the interesting stuff that's happening to me in Nigeria and South Africa is when people are collaborating across language, with the understanding of the other's language as well, not just collaborating in English. So thanks. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. Chioma, I know you had something burning.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I think I initially wanted to ask David, because he mentioned collaboration when he was talking about African music gaining traction in the diaspora. I just needed clarity as to when he says collaboration, are you referring to collaborating with international acts, or just collaboration with like publishing houses, or what's like? That was just the question I had on that point. So maybe you could just provide me with some clarity.
Yeah, I think I was talking about the success of collaboration, breaking out those West African acts by allowing them to break into the popular culture in the US and Western Europe. What I was talking about from our perspective as Downtown was more related to things like songwriting camps and working together as songwriters. We are having some particular good success with Jeremy Loops and his co-write with Ed Sheeran. I know it's not a typical African language scenario, but these types of collaborations are helping all African clients. So it's from that perspective that we are able to help. The label itself, who is the owner of the artist right or the artist, is often the one in terms of that direct artist to artist collaboration, and therefore we're only a service to them. We're actually not a label itself.
Thank you, David. So I want to come back to the different roles in the ecosystem, in the value chain, and back to Andrew now. You're customer facing. Andrew, you handle licensing. Mdundo, as a policy, do you go direct to the owner of the master? Normally in Africa, that's an artist. Or do you prefer to work with labels? What is your preference, or is there any particular rule? Just for any artists who are listening in, they want to get onto Mdundo. What are their options, and how does Mdundo deal with every type of engagement? The way you deal with a label may be different to how you deal with an independent artist, for example.
Okay, so for us, so we'd prefer going after the major labels or major distributors, because they have like a sizable amount of catalog which they can deliver, and they interface one-on-one with the artist better, and they offer other services which DSPs don't offer to artists, to the artists more better. But be that as it may, we also have a do-it-yourself platform where independent artists can also sign up and upload their contents directly on Mdundo. Right, but over time in West Africa, we found out that it's easier and better to deal directly with aggregators or distributors like TuneCore, because they will sort out their back end with the individual artists, and they give us a huge amount of catalog, here in West Africa. So, but we don't have like sort of to say like a preference of how we ingest music. I mean, if we get it through the label, fine. If we get it through Navigator, it's fine. But then again, we also encourage independent artists to also come on board individually.
Awesome. And I've observed, especially the last maybe 12, 18 months, Mdundo has really been going out from an educational point of view as well, holding a number of forums online, in person. Is this the sort of thing that you do with artists? You basically outline the value chain and just say you can engage with us in these different ways?
For the past 6 months, we've had a lot of webinars, right? We had a lot of artist mixers as well. So these two avenues give us these two mediums give us the avenue to physically interact with the various artists, be it label. So in those avenues or in those meetings, we educate labels or the artists on how best to access our platform and the promotions, or the promotions that can be accrued to them on the platform.
Awesome. Thank you. Similar question to you, Chioma. How does TuneCore outreach? When I first came across TuneCore, it was a DIY. You kind of log in and you teach yourself how to use the platform. Is that still how TuneCore is at the moment in Africa? Because I know there's been significant investment by the company in Africa recently. Or is there more of a stronger outreach program in terms of also building awareness, helping with, because there is a low level of, and this is why ONGEA exists, there is a generally low level of understanding around intellectual property and the different rights involved. And also how to engage with a label or label services or a distributor or retailer. So what does TuneCore do in terms of raising awareness and building awareness around best practice?
So you're 100% right as to the number of artists who still do not have a very good understanding of like distribution and publishing. It's quite interesting. When I first came into the role, it was kind of shocking almost to see artists who still patronize these piracy websites in the name of promotion, as they called it. So part of what we've done is, or what we continue to do is, educational initiatives. So anywhere where we can find a community of artists that we can engage with and then teach them or discuss with them about distribution, publishing, it's always for me it's a very big priority because of the points I had mentioned. Now it might be slightly better in countries like, let's say, Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, maybe Tanzania, but there are some other territories in West Africa like Sierra Leone, Liberia, where even looking at search trends on Google, you won't find anything on distribution, which is quite interesting. So for sure, we have artists. Of course, TuneCore is a DIY platform, so it's do it yourself. When it comes to platforms like Mdundo and other DSPs, what we help them do is ensure that whatever delivering is in line with what is needed to deliver it correctly on those platforms. And then we kind of act as a middleman. If there's an issue, we're able to relay that to the DSP in question. So yeah, any opportunity we find to educate, bring awareness to distribution, why you should be distributing, publishing, why you should take it seriously, and the money that you're leaving on the table, we always take those opportunities. So whether it's us coming up with something like we did with Africa Next, that's Former Social Media Week in February, or other partnerships. I'm going to be in Acces, Dar es Salaam coming up November. We have something else set up in Sierra Leone as well, educational initiatives. So anywhere we see where we can be with artists, especially independent, rising artists, to educate them about this, we always take the opportunity, because there's definitely a bit of a gap when it comes to that.
Yeah, yeah. And to you, Robert, monetizing lyrics is such a new thing, globally, but especially in Africa. How do African artists and writers become aware of LyricFind and that way of monetizing?
Well, thanks, Mike, for the question. It's honestly, it's been difficult. We do have a team in South Africa that aggregates lyrics for us. Like I said before, we worked with Mdundo for a while, and we'd like to work with Mdundo again, because you have artists uploading, your lyrics. Their lyrics to Mdundo platform. So I'm right now in Calgary, like I said before, at a conference called Breakout West. It's the first time I've been in Western Canada. I go to conferences all over the world. I was in India for All About Music a week ago, and Croatia, and Waves in Vienna, and Master the Music Business in Romania. Again, Eastern Europe is a place like Africa that is developing. It's an emerging market, and they have a kind of a different as well economic system. So again, it's about the DSPs doing the right thing and understanding the local situation. But if artists or publishers or labels go to lyricfind.com, they could learn about it, and they can see the different products and services that we offer. For us, we also work with the big aggregators. We only really recently started working with distributors, and we do work with TuneCore, as I said, and Believe, and The Orchard, and 1RPM, and CD Baby, kind of, Fuga, pretty much. We're working with Fuga. CD Baby, we work with Song Trust, because CD Baby only represents some of the lyric exhibition rights, whereas DistroKid, for example, represents the lyric exhibition rights. So it's a big difference. So we, for us, it's important. We work with Capasso, so we do have the rights on African music as well. Throughout Africa, at least to license and distribute, and we work with all the majors and downtown on the publishing side, on the services side as well. So we do our best to get the people to actually understand the value of getting their lyrics on digital services. I mean, remember, the digital services are relatively new. Again, people were making records before. People still think in terms of albums and CDs and things like that. But we work also with all the social media platforms as well, because to license the rights to show lyrics on social media, it's really important to have the license and to have that be paid, because we're actually exhibiting literally billions of lyrics around the world, like each month, right? So those clicks can add up. And for me, what I've always been trying to work towards is actually so that emerging artists as well are benefiting. It's not just the 1% who make 99% of the money. It's actually trying to raise the level of subsistence for all of the artists who actually are struggling to pay their rent or to make a living, to have music be a full-time job. And for me, if your lyrics are online, that means you actually might get a synchronization, which is a life-changing event if it's the right sync. And if they're not online, you wouldn't get that sync. So there's a lot of reasons to do this. But as you said, it is a relatively new right. I mean, we're talking about less than 20 years where lyrics were monetized on platforms, and things take time to evolve. I've been working to give music subtitles for almost 19 years, so things take time, but also things evolve quickly. And I think the new normal is all about keeping up with what's happening. So lyrics in the metaverse, lyrics in NFTs, lyrics and lyric translations. I mean, subtitles are the new normal. I mean, and if music has subtitles, it it boosts everything for everybody. It's, you know, music is not a zero-sum game. You know, you only have a certain amount of attention, but music has actually gone way down in the last 20 or 30 years in comparison to things like video games, right? In comparison to, you know, to taking pictures on your phone. I mean, that didn't used to exist. So the time that people actually spend with music and the money and the attention that they spend with music, it's important for all of us in the ecosystem to realize that we need to monetize it properly. We need to actually protect our copyrights. And when there is a new opportunity, like Mdundo was a new opportunity, and it takes time for Mdundo also to get their business together. To, you know, every startup, every new innovation, it takes time to change the system. I mean, there was piracy, and now piracy is shifting towards more legal services. And, you know, we were in a situation where all of a sudden the music industry went from a $40 billion business down to about a $10 billion business. Now it's creeping back up. And you know, there's a lot of the DSPs who are based on hardware, right? Apple is selling computers. Amazon is selling Prime. But with good negotiations from the music industry, both from the majors and from the indies, we can have the computers that they're selling with music and the services they're selling with Prime benefit music, as David was talking about with Amazon and Netflix and the films. So with every progression, there's always a catch-up time for the industry to actually create, right? With destruction, with change, there's a necessity to catch up and to protect and to build the monetization opportunities for musicians in Sierra Leone or wherever to actually generate enough income to live on their music. And that's super important for us in the industry to always remember that it's the emerging artists who are going to be the next artists who are actually singing songs that change the world, that make things different.
Thank you, Robert. And David, I wanted to talk about as well, in terms of outreach, you mentioned songwriting, you know, boot camps and what have you. Is there any other outreach that Downtown does for African artists in terms of, you know, educating them on rights? And then just going into the next section now, Robert has brought us into Web3. You know, what does Web3 look like for? It's a very wide question. I mean, Web3 is blockchain, it's NFTs. It's metaverse, it's gaming more than, you know, gaming consumption higher than music, which we're already seeing, but now we have music within the games. So if we could just close off on the outreach and then jump into Web3, what does that look like for Downtown and how are they preparing for it, if you're able to share?
Cool, thanks. Just on the outreach, if you're looking at Shear's social pages, you'll see a lot of information for songwriters. So there's definitely a lot of information you can access out there on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. In terms of segue into Web3, apologies for the noise in the background. Maybe Mike, give this to somebody else. I'm going to put in some headphones.
We don't hear any noise, David, but in your background.
Are you sure? Okay, sorry. Okay, all good. So what I was saying is one of the big challenges around the blockchain and crypto is the amount of energy it uses at the moment. And people ask me why we don't have Tesla cars in South Africa as well. We don't have power in South Africa. We literally have blackouts like 3 times a day. These are some of the challenges that need to be solved. But the idea of any musician, any creator being able to offer their music direct to the consumer without any intermediaries sounds very nice, but somebody's going to build the blockchain service that builds this contract that allows them to do it. So you're going to have an intermediary one way or another. In terms of what I'm seeing right now is content, as always, is king. I was lucky enough to buy my son an Oculus headset for his birthday, and had the experience of playing some games in virtual reality. The importance of music in making that experience something that is completely immersive is so vital. So music is always going to have a place in what this next evolution seems to be. And this is kind of like the early stage of what the metaverse is going to be, right? It's this transition that's going to happen. And whether you think about what you're going to do with your real estate online, what are you going to build on there? Certainly, there are going to be clubs and live events. There already are, but they're not as immersive as they could be. And when you're watching content or participating in social interaction, music is always going to be a part of that. So don't worry that as a creator, if you're not completely engaged with what's going on in terms of Web3, just understand that there will always be a role for music in technology as it rolls out.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Chioma, Web3, what does it mean for TuneCore and Believe, if you can maybe talk from that perspective?
Web3. Again, I agree with what David said. It's another opportunity for artists to be able to earn, and of course have more control over their content in terms of monetization and stuff. For TuneCore, obviously, is then because if given the nature of, and I'll speak for just African artists, and what I've seen is a lot of the time, many of them are not very interested in understanding the music side, let alone new advancements in technology and the metaverse. Let me use that term. So a lot of them are more interested in the creative side and the performance side. So that is, going into the studio, making music, or finding a stage where they can perform their music. So for artists, one of the things I would say is to have a very good understanding about, Web 3.0 right now and what it means for their career. Otherwise, you're gonna keep relying on middlemen, distributors, labels, etc., to help you do that, and you might, the artist might not earn as much. But for TuneCore, I mean, it is something that is on our radar. Nothing gets executed fully, but it's an interesting one just to see where it would go. I will say for artists, it's important that they have a very good understanding of it and not shy away from the business side of the music, but try to understand, how this could be beneficial to them and how they can take advantage of it. Because there's a lot of advantages to be taken with it, given that for now we don't necessarily have like regulatory or controlling bodies or authorities around that. So you get to how much you want to put for something, the content, and of course the publishing side, how that would translate, of which it would translate. So yeah, that's kind of my own point on it.
Excellent. Thank you, Chioma. There's something you said, and I want to pick up on it because it really rubs me up the wrong way when I hear people say it, and that's the term middleman. It's since when did intermediaries become such a dirty word? In our music industry. I mean, what caused that change, and is it an issue that the industry has just been misbehaving? Is it a code of conduct issue? Morals, ethics, and what have you? Because it's really tainted. So on one hand, you have the artists who dream of being on a label, and they dream that for forever and ever. And on the other hand, you have big artists saying, no, be independent. These middlemen are just greedy, and where do you find the balance? And maybe from your perspective, Chioma, and now come to David. What should inform that decision as an artist? In terms of choosing which direction to go, or maybe the direction is chosen for them. I'd like to get your idea on that.
I mean, you're right, because unfortunately, it kind of has a negative connotation, and sometimes you can blame the artist because of some experience they might have had with labels. So you find artists who would rather be independent, where they have control and all. So it really just depends on the artist. So something I've seen here in Africa, and I'll just use Nigeria for instance, is there are still a lot of artists who are interested in being with a label, for artist development, the advancement it gets, and etc., irrespective of what the rev share is going to be. A lot of artists still desires that. So again, it just comes back to the artist and their own knowledge of the industry and what it means. It's almost like what poison do you want to take? So do you want to be independent and bear all the burden of your marketing, branding, and everything, figuring the things out by yourself? Or maybe it's a label where, yeah, you might get these additional things, the necessary support that you need, but then you're going to have to split that revenue according to what is decided.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
So it's just a question of, like, I always have to say, which poison do you want to drink? Really, sorry, I probably should change that that phrase or whatever, but it's, you have a choice. You need to understand what each entails and what works for you. Do you understand? So
Yeah.
hence why I always keep saying that every time I go out for speaking engagements, I always tell artists that you need to treat your music as a business, irrespective of whether you're independent or whether you're with a label. You need to understand all the intrinsic details about it. You understand? And not just focus on just the creative side of the business. Otherwise, you end up, let's say if you're a label and then something might be going wrong, maybe nothing really is going wrong, but you kind of just feel like you're being cheated or something isn't unfair, or something is unfair because you didn't read the fine print. Do you understand? So it comes back to, you know, understanding both sides and deciding what works for you.
Awesome. David?
I think, you know, just to expand on that, there's always a fair exchange for fair value proposition. So
Yes.
what Chioma is saying is, if you understand what you're giving up and what you're getting in return is fair value, then there's no problem with that. The kind of middleman that I think you're referring to is the gatekeepers that are there opportunistically and are not really adding any value. And I'll give you an example. In the African continent, if you want to be on an aggregator, you need to have the ability to pay, you need to have the ability to receive money. So often what happens is that there are people who have bank accounts and credit cards and will set themselves up as a middleman, offering a service to individual creators to make their music available. What is the value that they're adding in that exchange? They're simply a banking reference. So you know, I think in each case, you need to be examining what that fair exchange for fair value is, because even if that person is going through the aggregator, you're still paying the aggregator share, and then you're having to pay for that banking finance kind of introduction. And in some cases, that really does become onerous on individual creators.
Awesome, David. Thank you. I want to jump back to Mdundo. Andrew, you already mentioned, you know, the kind of pros and cons of, you know, working with independents versus working with labels and distributors. So if there's anything else you want to add to that, that's fine. But I also wanted to move ahead. You mentioned in your opening around, you know, Mdundo being a solution to piracy, and I'd like to and Chioma mentioned piracy as well. So in Kenya, I convene Partners Against Piracy, and we did a study last December that it's basically $900 million a year, the creative industry of Kenya. That's all sectors, including film and gaming and the like, and books. I think music was about $150 million is lost to piracy. I'm sure in Nigeria it's as big, and Chioma also mentioned that, you know, some artists were using piracy as a way to get their music out there as well. So Mdundo's been a really great innovation to stem that, and I work with your founder here in Kenya in PAP to also work from a regulatory point of view. What else is Mdundo doing, or what else is the industry doing in Western Africa to basically curtail piracy and move? You know, it takes about 99% of legitimate revenue out of the value chain. So, you know, we have an opportunity to times 100 whatever everyone's earning at the moment. So what's happening on your side of the world with regards to that?
So in Nigeria, I'll speak for Nigeria and Ghana markets. So for Nigeria, piracy has been a huge problem in the past. Even till now, it's still quite a sizable amount of problem. Back in the day, you have more artists, or you have artist content or works being put on pirate websites, and those pirate websites make a huge amount of money selling off those websites. But right now, there's a huge sensitization awareness for most artists. Most artists don't necessarily go towards that direction anymore. They prefer monetizing their content on various platforms like Apple Music or Mdundo, as the case may be. Even if you see their content on those pirate websites, you see it basically drives you back. If you click on the link, it basically drives you back to a monetized DSP like Mdundo or or Apple Music. But for us, what more we're doing, we partnered with a company that helps us track and delete tracks of pirate websites. So, for example, if an artist would come on board and says, "Oh, he has his content on X and X website," we can help him track it over Africa and delete it wherever the case may be, wherever we find it. And also on our own, Mdundo coming on board has really given this artist or created some sort of awareness that instead of you having those, instead of you having your content on those pirate web platforms, bear in mind those platforms reach a wide array of African audiences based off of their market model, right? And you're aware that most users in Africa can't afford streaming or wouldn't want to be in a platform where you have that is subscription based. So they prefer going to those pirate websites where you can have the music on their phone. So we give them a viable alternative. A viable alternative. So have come on Mdundo, get your song, get the same service that you get being on a pirate platform. Then in turn we pay royalties or earnings with the content providers.
Awesome, thank you. Chioma, you mentioned piracy earlier. What's happening, and how is TuneCore, working in the fight against it?
Yeah, pretty similar to what Maddie has said as well. So for us, doing our best to educate artists about this is interesting because you find artists who are willing to pay like $20, $50 to get their music on those platforms. Now, aside from those platforms making money from running ads and things like that, they charge artists money to put it on the platforms as well. And a lot of
Wow.
artists actually do that. Yeah, a lot of artists actually do that in the claims that it's promotion. You get, and I get it, because a lot of times those websites get a whole lot of traffic. Do you understand? So similar, we also partner with sites that can also help take down content from those platforms, but we're also very focused on the education. So rather than say don't do this, you need to give them an alternative, and as to why that alternative is better. So hence where in educational initiatives about music distribution, getting the music on these more, legitimate platforms, like of course Mdundo, Apple, Spotify, and whatnot. So that's kind of our own tactics. So education, explaining, why you should be distributing, explaining the publishing side of the business, and Matt is also correct in the sense that the trend is changing slightly, at least compared to 2020 when I got into this job and seeing everything I was seeing. Till now, I would say it's significantly improved.
I would also argue as well that I've noticed myself that there's a general increase in awareness and interest to non-performance revenue. It's very interesting. We had lockdown immediately, shows dried up, and then all of a sudden, people started thinking, "Hang on, I remember I signed to a publishing company. I remember, and my music's out on distribution." And they started becoming a little bit more focused on that than they have in the past. And I guess the new normal meant that also we had increased consumption. Do you feel that kind of shift in attitude and interest has stayed and will stay as we kind of, as the pandemic hopefully begins to end?
I think. Oh, sorry. Go on, Robert.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So I do think so. However, with trends we've seen, there's been a slight change in behavior in terms of artists, putting out more music and focusing on. There's an increase in terms of publishing. We saw it go up, during the pandemic. More people were indoors. Trends were happening on social media and things like that. So there's that increase with publishing. More people wanting to do publishing for your music and stuff. So I would say yes. Even post pandemic, it's kind of stayed the same, and it's been rising from the trends I've seen from our own internal reports.
Awesome. Robert?
Yeah, I mean, when LyricFind started, all lyrics online were unauthorized, non-monetized, completely illegitimate, but it was still beneficial, as Chioma was saying, in terms of promotion for labels and publishers to allow that to continue happening until we helped the NMPA, the National Music Publishers Association in the US, start to go after the illegal websites. So which were the innovators? So there's innovation, which is usually piracy, and then there's deals that are worked out between the innovators, the the pirates, the technology innovators who are also pirates in a way, because because the companies that would actually be the ones that would be licensing this new technology don't have a clue at the beginning as to where this is going to go, or the technology. So the labels and the publishers are always really playing catch up, and the artists are at the end of that stick, really, because the artists are also playing catch up to figure out. And actually, the artists who are usually the most successful are the ones who can get ahead of that curve and work with the new technologies in ways that really suit them, even if all of the rights issues aren't quite resolved yet. So it's always a question of actually continuing to make sure that the rights issues are resolved, that the creators are getting paid, and that to really embrace new technology, not to prohibit new technology. I think the labels and the publishers have also kind of learned from their mistakes. I mean, the labels and the publishers actually kind of created piracy because they could have done deals with LimeWire and the other Napster, when Napster wasn't a legitimate service, and but they wanted to sell plastic. They wanted to continue the status quo because they were actually doing pretty well with selling plastic, right? But so it's a question of kind of being aware of where the world's going, continuing to push for the world to go in the right way, and to protect, to protect the songwriters, and to protect the value of music along the way, so that the value of music in all these, I agree with David that in all the new technologies will use music, but I think the issue and the thing we have to be careful about is that we want young people to actually understand the value of music and to appreciate it, and to kind of revere it in a way that that music has existed since the beginning of time. Music existed probably before language, right? I mean, rhythms existed before spoken word. So I think it's just continuing to take advantage of the innovations in the technology and to license them properly and to figure it out. I mean, we're always trying to figure out where lyrics can go in new places, like the cars or the hospitals, or language learning tools, or synchronization platforms, or lyric speakers, or all kinds of different things. And I think that's super important for the industry to embrace the new normal every day, and things change every day. Change is the only thing that we can count on. Change is the only thing that we can count on. Other than that, trying to maintain the status quo is not a good business model, right? You have to learn to be able to pivot and take advantage of the technology, and then work with the technology. Even Mdundo, probably at the beginning, there were challenges in terms of rights, right? I mean, you mentioned some of the challenges of getting international repertoire. In South Africa, Capasso, there were challenges in the beginning. There's always challenges in the beginning of trying to make things happen and protect the sustainability of music, which is actually part of the quality of our lives. So it is really important. Just as protecting the environment, it's also protecting the sustainability of creativity and the creative economy around the world.
Awesome.
So
Thank you, Robert. Go ahead, David.
Chioma's point about each creator as a business. The question is, what is your role within that business? Definitely being locked down at home, you had more time to go online and learn about a lot of, I suppose, the legal aspects of the business that maybe you hadn't had the time before when you were busy playing live. But as COVID restrictions have fallen away, the question is, where is a creator's time best spent? So again, it comes back to that trade-off of fair value for a fair service, and finding the people to surround yourself with that will give you the advice, that will give you access to the right technology, that will make your career take off in the way that you want it to do. Knowing is always important. Understanding how all those pieces fit together is always important. But you don't have to be the doer of all of those things. if you understand what is required and you go out and find someone who gives fair trade, fair value for a fair service to provide that service.
Yeah.
I think build up a repertoire of tools in your toolkit or people that surround you and use them to help take your career to the next level.
Awesome, David. Thank you. Also, just again linked to what we saw in the pandemic, we had an anti-piracy session, a panel, and we were talking about, we had U.S. Patent and Trade Organization there, and they said that during the pandemic they saw increased consumption, but they also saw increase in piracy by about 30%, and they actually saw something like piracy as a service. You know, this is also around film and TV. You know, how do you set up your own pirated TV station, pirated radio station, what have you? And you know, to Robert's point about, you know, music still be revered by the young generation when you have, you know, for example, you know, the TikTok when it's launched wasn't doing music rights and what have you, and neither was Facebook. You know, obviously, you know, with innovation, as we say, they innovate first, and then the laws catch up to them. But what's very interesting, my question to you, David, is that do you feel, or is the industry concerned that music, especially if we look at streaming services with all you can eat at a very low price, is the industry concerned that music is losing its value and will lose its value moving forward?
I think it's a fair question, and if you think about the size of music, when it was a piece of vinyl in a cardboard box, or a cassette in a plastic box, or a thin piece of plastic as a CD, it's now ephemeral. So the allocation of value has to be through an educational process. It also has to be in a bargain, a fair bargain with the consumer out there, that what they're getting is fair value for what they're paying. So I think that the increase in the total pot of money available for the music industry over the recent years has shown that there is now a much better value proposition. And as I talked about the major streaming services and some of the new localized services coming in at the right price points, you'll see another escalation in terms of that total value, that total pot. But there's always going to be this kind of leading edge, the bleeding edge, where there is new technology and people who are operating in that technology, either in advancing, you know, the cause of everything that is just, or some that are just advancing their own personal cause. And you know, sometimes the one turns out to be the other, and vice versa. So yes, the music industry was definitely slow in participating in the new digital age. I'm not convinced that we have enough of the new leadership who understand that this next transition is going to be as dramatic as the one that was before. I think people are getting comfortable with the way this new business model works. Streaming is a service that works, particularly for the major record labels. Look at the value they're building and the money they're investing into new companies. But I do think that there is going to be a continual evolution, and that revolution of evolution is going to be faster and faster. So, you know, young people are, in my mind, the people that we should be employing in the music industry to teach us who've become complacent about where music should be best monetized and how to monetize it. So anyway.
Is that a global thing? Your reference is global, David, or Africa? About the complacency?
No, I think that Robert go. I think it's global.
Okay. Like to hear your view on that, Robert. Thank you.
Well, just one kind of example. It's obviously a politically sensitive topic right now, but let's take a look at Russia for a second. Russia exploded in the music business in the relatively recent past, went like up a boom, like a hockey stick, they say in Canada, you know, and it's a bunch of different reasons for that, actually. One is that the global services came in and started paying properly. Russia was always a difficult place because it was very well controlled by the oligopoly of Russia, and it was super controlled, and basically it was hard to get money out of Russia. But when the global services came in, you saw the huge expansion of income of the Russian pie, so to speak, in the music business. And now that a lot of the global services have pulled out of Russia, it's kind of back to where it was before. And I'm not saying I disagree with the global services. They didn't completely pull out because they're still available, but they're not actually charging consumers, and there's no way to get money in and out as well. So I think, on the positive side, we can look at Russia as actually a place where, and we've seen it in Eastern Europe, we've seen it in Chile and different parts of South America, where all of a sudden a market starts to take advantage of local repertoire in a different way, and as well global repertoire. And because of the energy and the collective actions of organizations like Merlin, or like the Worldwide Independent Network, the WIN network of independent music around the world. And I think that still has yet to come in Africa. I mean, there's a lot of progress. Again, I think Capasso made a lot of progress in the CMO world. We're as LyricFind trying to work with all the other African CMOs as well. But the progress is over time. But I mean, TikTok comes in, and all of a sudden now TikTok is being monetized. We have an agreement with Rezo, which is a TikTok kind of subscription service that's going to be TikTok Music at some point, I'm sure. So the important thing is actually understanding that when there's something that's improperly licensed in an innovative source, it's up to the music ecosystem, to the organizations to take a look at that and say, well, how can we work with this new technology that, even with, Twitch becoming more legal, for example, and, the gaming industry being able to be monetized, and, Oculus and all the different opportunities that technology brings. If technology is working hand in hand with the copyright owners and protecting the value of music, it's super important for all of us to kind of keep that front of mind. And to work with these new opportunities, and to continue to create new opportunities for the sustainability of the creative class, and as well the education of the creative class. I mean, when I started, there were no music business colleges or programs anywhere in the world. Now there's lots of them. There was one conference, it was MEDEM. Now there's lots of them, all over the world. So I think that the education is important, and everybody who has a computer can be a musician as well. I mean, there was no beats weren't created on computers. I mean, so they were on drums or whatever. So it's the evolution of technology and the evolution of people. It's just really important to remember that that there's rights involved as well, and to encourage creativity, encourage technology, but also continue to respect the creators of this of music. So,
excellent. Thank you, Robert. Chioma, is music losing its value, or are there other ways that we can create value moving forward?
You mean in Africa? Yes.
Yeah, probably from an African context, and also looking at African music, going into the diaspora as well. What are your thoughts around that?
No, I don't think music is losing its value. For one, I feel like, yes, there's still a lot of room to grow, but compared to what African music is now, compared to say what 20, 25 years ago, there's like an upward trend happening. Like I mentioned before, there's more eyes on the African music. It's not just being consumed locally, but now it's going internationally. However, we need work in terms of infrastructure. Now, maybe South Africa might, be the leader in terms of the musical infrastructure being in place, and and streaming, not streaming numbers increasing there. But it's been projected for it to improve in other African countries like we keep focus on 5 markets, being Egypt, Morocco, Nigeria, and 2 others. So there is that room to grow. There'll be increased value in terms of, and when I'm saying that, I'm going to refer to things like streaming. Streaming numbers now, last I checked, which was last night, the streaming numbers for Sub-Saharan Africa, this is exclusive of South Africa stats, is at, I think, 13 point something million, 13.7 million is where it's at right now, exclusive of South Africa. A chunk of that is coming from streaming. So there's a decline happening with like downloads. There's a decline happening. This doesn't include live performances, by the way, but there's a shift that is happening now. It might be slow, but it's kind of projected to increase as things continue. Now with the streaming platforms, a lot of this revenue, additional revenue that has come in, is coming from like ad-supported streaming platforms and so on. And there was a point we were talking about with global brands coming in and adapting, localizing their products for this market, which is quite a price-sensitive market. But it's also important to have your customer lifetime value. So you bring in this customer, say at a young age, because consumption typically is the younger guys, especially in Africa, and you bring them in with the freemium, which is the ad supporters. But if you're able to retain those customers onto a point where they get it, they become working class, and of course, as you're growing, you're earning more. Eventually, they're going to abandon premium and upgrade. This might take some time. It's up to you to figure out what that LTV is. So I do, in my humble opinion, I feel like it's not losing its value. However, it's going to increase, in value. And I haven't even talked about streaming numbers coming from what's it called, and of course rights, revenue from rights and stuff coming from the diaspora and stuff. But I don't think it's going to lose its value. I wouldn't say I don't know if I should say we're still in kind of like our infancy, but eventually we're gonna it's gonna come up some more. So that's where I'll kind of leave it at. I don't think so.
Awesome. Thank you, Chioma. Andrew, putting Mdundo on the spot, your music is free. It's ad supported, but it's free to the consumer. Do you feel, what does Mdundo feel about what that means in terms of the value of the music perceived by the consumer, and what are you seeing?
So for us, okay, I'll start from the top. I don't think African music in terms of value is diminishing. Be the heck, I feel African music value is just starting. Like we are experiencing just 10% of the value of African music, or the value African music starts to gain. And right now, African music is getting bigger and going global. Also for us, and Mdundo, um, West African music is actually really big, right? And for us, giving the users here an alternative platform as against the westernized platforms like Apple Music and Spotify. So we have adapted to the market. We know the market constraints. We know that Africa has a bit of infrastructure, if I should put it that way.
Yeah.
Be it in West Africa and East Africa, where in terms of data pricing, in terms of availability and fastness of the internet. So we are offering the users or Africans in general an alternative, or not alternative, yeah, an alternative to the westernized DSPs to actually access music, download music, and consume music. So, and with the advent of Afrobeat globally, right, we also have been a Pan-African marketing platform whereby our users in East Africa, Southern Africa can easily access Western African content without having to stream or having to pay for subscription, as the case may be. So yeah, in terms of value, I think we're just seeing the beginning of the rich value African music has to offer.
Sorry.
Can you hear me? Did you get that? Hello, Mike.
Sorry, it's a dodgy mute switch. Cool. Thank you, Andrew. So we're in our final round, so we're actually out of time. But as we go, thank you very much to our experienced and distinguished panel for generously sharing their experience, their views, their time with us. As you leave, I'd just like you to give one piece of advice. 30 seconds. one piece of advice and maybe make a contribution into the chat as well that you would give any artist, be it upcoming, professional? I mean, we know they're in different life cycles. Wanting to consider, one of your services of you guys represented here, and you represent different levels of the value chain as well. Let's start with you, Chioma.
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. So if I'm here as an artist watching this video either live with us or the recording later on, why should an artist join a platform like TuneCore, for example? What are the benefits and what does the future hold as well?
All right. For an artist, especially if you're independent and you want to do it yourself, you prefer to be independent, you might want to consider a platform like TuneCore. For one, there's no claim to your rights, your content rights, so you own that 100%. This is for the distribution side. However, for the publishing, you pay one-time fee to register, which what that means, we help you register with the various PROs around the world, and then there's a commission split in terms of the publishing revenue. So, if you want to be able to do it yourself, that will be one thing I would say in terms of TuneCore. There's amazing customer support. We have a very robust blog, where you can learn anything you need to learn, whether it's about distribution, publishing. There's a support team 24 hours that's available to respond to you if you have any queries about that. So, and of course, we're localized in the sense that there's a local team here, which I am in charge of. So there's always someone to reach out to. We recently launched our social media page where you can also engage with. So there's a few things I'll throw out there.
Thank you, Chioma. Same question for LyricFind, Robert.
Thanks, Mike. I mean, in terms of the one piece of advice you asked before, get your lyrics up on all the services, but get them up legally. And if they're not up legally, this goes for David and everybody else, if they're not up legally in America right now on the major services, there's $150,000 per screenshot maximum penalty, copyright infringement. Easy settlement also. So wow. If they're not up legally, if your lyrics are not up legally, get them up legally. And if you're singing in languages other than English, make sure you add subtitles as you can and get good translations of the subtitles, because that makes your market truly global. If you have success in Brazil, for example, translate your stuff into Portuguese as well, your songs. So, I mean, the advice is actually get your lyrics online. One sync can change your life. And if they can't find your lyrics on Google search, the sync supervisor, the music supervisor might not be able to use it. So also, do your homework, work with professionals, make sure you learn as much as you can, and, continue to write great songs and great music, and protect your copyrights through proper representation, whether it's DIY representation or major labels or whatever. Write great music and get the music out there.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. And Robert has put some of the LyricFind links in the chat as well for anyone watching. Chioma, feel free to also drop some links in the chat. Andrew as well. Coming to you, Andrew. Mdundo, why should an artist consider having their music on Mdundo?
Quite simple. I mean, you'll be giving you access to over 20 million users in Africa. You not having your song on Mdundo, you're neglecting our user base, our numbers, and our diversity. And also, being on Mdundo gives you access to users across Africa. Like, for example, a Kenyan artist can reach his users in Kenya or in Tanzania or Rwanda, as the case may be. An artist in Tanzania can reach Nigerian audience, can reach Kenyan audience. So we offer cross-marketing activities for African artists or even international artists that are on Mdundo, as the case may be. So, I mean, in as much as a typical African artist to have his songs on westernized platforms, they represent a small fraction of the total music users or total music consumers here in Africa. We represent a larger percentage of the real African music users. So yeah, so by passing us you're losing out on a huge amount of revenue that your catalog or your tracks will make from our users in Africa. So yeah.
Awesome, Andrew. And just because I've worked with Mdundo over the years as well, I do recall that Mdundo offers also quite a lot of consumption data on the back end to artists. Is that still being offered? Yeah. Okay.
Oh
Awesome.
yeah,
That
yeah,
can
sure.
help.
So we've actually even oh yeah,
Go
we
ahead.
actually have a CMS platform whereby major aggregators or even independent artists can access, and you can see real time your data. You can see real time where your downloads coming from, where in Africa, down to demographics, down to gender, down to age. So you can have a huge amount of data from your CMS platform here on Mdundo.
Yeah,
So yeah,
and one
so
thing
that
we
also.
didn't really want. Awesome, thank you. And one thing we ran out of time to touch on is that part of the new normal as well is data driven decisions. So that's a
Oh yeah.
really good opportunity right there. Yeah, David Alexander, you have the final comments. What can your organization offer any artist listening to this presentation?
Look, I think there are a lot of options available to creators, which is really brilliant. And that's the great thing about it is there is so much to choose from. First of all, understand what rights you are able to make available. The sound recording right, that master recording is generally owned by one person. The music publishing rights can often be split, particularly if there are a number of writers. So don't be signing up rights that you don't actually control. Second of all, look at what that fair exchange for fair value is. Some people have an upfront fee and a percentage of back end. Some people have an annual fee. Some people have a bigger percentage of back end. All of the offerings are slightly different. All of them offer a different value proposition depending on where you are in your stage of the career. So I think definitely be aware as the creator. And if you're battling to make a decision, find somebody who can help you make that call, whether that's legal advice or a manager, someone who's got general business advice. But taking advice before you commit to something that is a 3 or a 5 year agreement would really be important. So I'm going to put up the link for CD Baby. It's a really easy process to follow. I see that somebody had put the Share Publishing Facebook socials, so thank you very much. And we are optimistic about the future for African music as a part of the global music environment.
Awesome, David. Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists. We've come to the end of our time. Thank you to Andrew from Mdundo, Head of Licensing, Western Africa, Robert Singerman, Senior Vice President, International Publishing for LyricFind, Chioma for Head of TuneCore West and East Africa as well. Thank you for joining us. And David Alexander, Senior VP, New Markets Downtown Music Group. I'm going to end this session and we are going to jump into the networking. If any of you who are listening want to network with us and ask some more one-on-one questions, thank you very much for attending. Enjoy the networking lounge.